we're looking into the road commission, why the county roads are so bad. I think we have a pretty good understanding of why that is, and it comes down to people. And it doesn't just come down to money, it comes down to bad administration, and we'll explain that to you. We'll also talk about, we'll update you on the memo of understanding that the police and the administration, the Flint mayor's administration has put together, and whether or not that's working, and what new things have happened in relation to that. We also want to talk about, is there any change in the community policing? You know, that's the program like where police are supposed to be on the street, helping, working with the community, working with various agencies in the community, neighborhood groups, and it's not being done. And we're paying millions of dollars a year for that particular program. And as a result, I think the law's being broken because the money that you voted for this community policing is being used in other areas, and you have no community policing program, and that clearly is a crime prevention program, and it's going down the drain. And what I want to know is whether or not the mayor and the police administration are going to straighten that out, or maybe we'll have to bring a lawsuit. Anyway, we're going to discuss those things with you next week, and we're working on them right now. And in the meantime, we have Tom Pabst, you know, as I say, very prominent attorney here in this area, considered, if not the best, one of the best trial attorneys in this whole state of Michigan, and knowledgeable in this area that we want to talk to about this. So, again, we'll be with you for about an hour. Now, the last part of this program, we want to show you the NAACP's meeting press conference on the memo of understanding that there was a lot of confusion on. We want to show you the entire meeting so you can see what happened. And we're going to put that on at the end of the program here. It runs about 20-25 minutes, but I think it's important because it does sufficiently describe what really took place when this Justice Department came into Flint and demanded that the mayor, the police agencies, the African American Police Officers Association, the NAACP, and all these, and the mayor, sit down and discuss this thing. And they did so for 10 hours. Press conference was the culmination of this meeting. So we'll talk about that at the end of the program here. So let's go on, and I want to introduce you to our friend Tom Pabst, who's been on this program in the past, to talk about the impact of the affirmative action proposal that was on the ballot last week, and how it impacts the issues of discrimination at the job place because of gender, because of race, because of age, because of disabilities, all of these things we want to discuss with him. Hi, we're here with attorney Tom Pabst, who's a litigator, and meaning that he tries cases in court. From tonight, we're here with an attorney from Flint, Tom Pabst, who is a expert in the various subject matters we want to talk about tonight. He's a trial attorney. He handles all kinds of cases, from automobile accident cases to discrimination cases in court. And we want to get his opinion on what the recent law that we passed, the constitutional amendment that would eliminate preferences in the workplace, admission to schools, contracts within government, and how that impacts job discrimination. Does it eliminate job discrimination? Just what does it do? And Tom is very knowledgeable in this area, and as I say, he's tried many, many cases in court on these subject matters. So Tom, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And, you know, as you know, last week in the election, the people of the state of Michigan spoke and said they wanted a constitutional amendment that prohibited situations where people would be given preferences in job and hiring and appointments to schools and admissions to schools and job or contract applications. You know, you've tried many cases and you're very, very knowledgeable in the area of job discrimination. How does that impact that law on job discrimination? For example, the Civil Rights Act, the Equal Pays Act, the Age Discrimination Act, the Disabilities Act. All of these laws are in both the state and the federal laws.
Right.
And how does this law, this constitutional amendment that prohibits class, prohibits affirmative action, things like that, how does that impact these laws?
It doesn't impact those laws. I guess you could a good analogy would be a shield and a sword. You know, it's the difference between a shield and a sword. The civil rights laws that we all recognize as prohibiting employers from discriminating against us based on race, sex, religion, national origin, height, weight, those weren't affected at all. I mean, on a state level, we call that the L.A. Larson Civil Rights Act. On the federal level, it's Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that former President Lyndon Johnson passed into law. This proposal, too, that was passed recently, has no impact on those laws. They're still in place, and they still will shield a victim of discrimination against that discrimination and give him a remedy, to right the wrong that's been done to the person. So in that sense, the shield wasn't affected at all. What was affected was the sword. In other words, these preferences or set-asides or affirmative things that are being done to as a remedy, for past wrongs, that was affected. So basically, they left the shield in place, both at the federal and the state level. That wasn't touched. But they took the sword away. They said that no more sword, on that. No more considering race as an affirmative way, to allow someone to get into school, or to get the job, or to get an entry level anything anymore. No more using that affirmatively as a preference. No more using it as a sword. Okay, but it didn't do anything to the shield, that we all had before the election, and we still have after the election.
Now, you've tried many, many cases in court,
right.
And probably you're in court more than anybody else in this county, trying cases.
My fair share. I do my part.
Yeah, especially in the area of discrimination.
Yeah.
Representing African American people, representing other minorities, and representing white people.
It's very dear to my heart. I'm against discrimination, and I really feel proud at being able to be like a private attorney general under our laws and to do something about it. So of all the cases that I handle, I'm most proud of the civil rights cases, and I represent many blacks who have been discriminated against, many women who have been discriminated against and treated like second-class citizens. And unfortunately, it's still going on more often than anyone would like to think. So it hasn't gone away, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, in regard to the issue of job discrimination, give us some examples of what you mean by that, like a hiring in regard to schooling and things like that.
Well, I represent a lot of blacks and women who don't get the job because they're black or they're a woman, or don't get the promotion, or they get fired, because they're black or they're a woman. They have a new boss come in, he doesn't like blacks, and next thing you know, the black's out. And it happens, I was shocked at how frequently it happens. I mean, I'm busy as can be in my practice, and I do probably 90% civil rights litigation. So there's absolutely a need for these laws. There's no question about that.
Right, and is it in both government and private jobs?
Sure, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Now the affirmative action proposal that was approved last week that amends our Constitution, that says you can't provide preferences anymore.
Right.
Is that only governmental jobs?
Yeah, the government, no state action, well, especially the government. I think that's what that drew the fire like the lightning rod, like University of Michigan and grants. There's this young girl from Riverview or Trenton, which is a blue-collar area, and she didn't grow up with any special advantages, and her dream was to go to the University of Michigan and graduate. I mean, that was her dream. And she couldn't get in because they were considering race, and African Americans got in, in front of her, and there was no seat for her.
But the marks were comparable, is that right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and everything else was equal, or grads was just disqualified. So I think what happened in this election on Proposal 2 is people were saying that the way this is being applied, the way it's being applied in real life is not fair. It's the poor white kids who are paying the cost, for societal discrimination, and people perceive that's not right. We've got to do it a different way. I don't think anyone would deny that blacks and women have been treated like second-class citizens in the workplace, and they still are being, in my opinion. I mean, it's well known. Women make maybe 3/4 of what a man makes for the same job. I mean, these are statistics compiled by the United States government.
And these things are wrong.
Oh, of course they're wrong. I mean, why should a woman get 3/4 of the pay a man gets for the same job?
But the law says they're still wrong. That affirmative action proposal that was passed has no impact on those. Those people who are discriminated against because of race, national origin, gender, or what have you, in getting a job or getting a promotion in both private and public sector are protected under our laws.
They are. They're protected under both sets of laws. On a state level, it's known by the acronym ELCRA, which is the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. That's the one that says you can't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin, height, and weight. You also have federal laws that say the same thing. You can't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, religion, national origin. That's known as Title VII of the 1964 Federal Civil Rights Act that Lyndon Johnson passed. So both governmental entities that we live under, our United States government and our state of Michigan government, have laws that protect women and blacks in the workplace if they can prove a case that they've been discriminated against. And that's exactly what I litigate. Those are exactly the cases I bring in court and I'm most proud to litigate.
Now, that also, I would assume, applies to schools.
Sure.
If a person tries to get into school and it's clear that they've been discriminated against and someone else is let in, let's suppose a black student wants to get into school,
right,
and a white student wants to get into school,
right,
and the black student is prohibited from getting in or rejected, and you can establish that it was because of race or gender or anything else,
right,
that's a violation of the law still.
It is, and both those laws that I just said, ELCRA and Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, would give that victim of discrimination a cause of action where he could sue in court and he could recover money for the wrong done to him. That was what it was like before Proposal 2 was voted on, and that's still what it's like now. That didn't change at all.
Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the ways that discrimination takes place in the workplace. We are obviously...
Well, there are many, and insidious ways, too.
Yeah, all right. The hiring,
sure,
promotion,
right,
transfer,
right,
changing hours, and if you can prove any of those things are being done for discriminatory reason, because you're black or because you're a woman or what have you,
right,
you can bring a lawsuit for that.
Yes, you can. Actually, these are wonderful laws which embody our hope. Our hope. Actually, that was expressed by Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech. that there'll come a day when, people are judged on the content of their character instead of, the color of their skin determines who gets a job or who gets into school or who gets promoted, or whether it's a woman or a man, determines who gets the job or who gets fired. It's really the embodiment of our hope that there will be a day when those things that nobody can control, like who you were born as, what gender, the color of your skin, we're hoping that there comes a day when those things no longer matter.
Now, I would think there's a whole new spectrum here of groups of people that are going to be discriminated against. For example, the law says that it's discriminatory to take into account in making a decision on whether you will be given the job, as, for example, your birthplace. With the Muslim thing now, with people, the Muslim women wearing the headpieces and things like that, I would think there's some discrimination going on in those areas too. This is a whole new field that's opening up, it would seem to me, because it has to do not only with the color of the skin, but their religion, their background, where they came from, and things like that. All of those are instances where discrimination can take place, and there would be causes of action.
That's true. That's true. I guess, as we know, living our lives, it's like waves coming in on a beach. One political season, illegal aliens, are foisted up there, as the group that we should hate or people should hate. And all of a sudden, everyone who's Hispanic, is being looked at in a different way, or maybe not getting a job, or maybe getting fired. And if we have a war in Iraq, it's very easy for it to spill over, to Arabs here in the United States who have been citizens and good citizens for a long, long time, and for them to feel the backlash of that. It's not surprising at all that would happen when people's emotions get involved. That's exactly why these laws were enacted. And that's exactly the beauty of the rule of law. The law is an objective standard that we can all live by and we can all rely on, and take comfort in. And that's why there's a need for these laws. And thank goodness, this proposal too didn't affect these laws that act as a shield, and give people a cause of action at all, either on the state or the federal level. All this proposal too did was say, that's fine, you can still have your cause of action, but we don't want you to go further and have a sword, so to speak, and start using race and using gender, to keep other people out of a job or a promotion. That's gone too far. I think that's all that the vote says.
Okay. Well, let me mention to you another highly volatile area right now, and that has to do with English language.
Mm-hmm.
Some businesses, some employers are requiring that the person be able to speak English language. And of course, if there's a need for that, this was a telephone operator dealing all the time with English people or English-speaking people, I can understand that. But let's suppose a situation where a person comes in and can't speak English, let's say a Latino, but can work in a shop where English doesn't have to be spoken. They come in, they sit at a machine all day, work at it, and the person says, well, you don't speak English, so I'm going to fire you. And it really has nothing to do with the job.
That would be illegal. If you did that, that would be illegal. If
that's a violation.
It is, because it's discriminating based on national origin, But, I'd like to say this about that, Bob, if I could. I think a lot of these things are red herrings brought up by politicians to divide us as a people. For example, the English-only thing. And they get great currency out of that. I think it divides us as Americans, and they do it to exploit us, just to keep power. Is English only going to help Ford or General Motors compete against Toyota, and give us jobs here in Michigan? I mean, is the problem that we have a 61-year-old Mexican grandmother swimming the Rio Grande to come over here and clean toilets in the Holiday Inn? I mean, if we just stop her from coming over here, is that going to help General Motors and Ford compete against Toyota I mean, is that really our problem? I think a lot of these things are to misdirect us, away from what the real problems are, and they get us fighting one group against another. I think that's the real problem. But if he could prove that English only and it was because of his national origin, he could file a lawsuit and recover money for that.
Now, let's talk for a moment about disabilities. There's a lot of people with disabilities.
Right.
I think the Supreme Court just came down last year or something on some of the disability acts and how far it can go and things like that. And I was surprised they went pretty far.
There's so much in my experience. There's hostility in the courts, as to these ADA and the disability laws. I mean, so much so I don't even take them anymore. I think they're extremely difficult to win, given all the parsing and nitpicking that's been done by the courts and the judicial laws. Extremely hard to win anymore.
How about the age discrimination? You're finding...
There's plenty of that going on.
Is that...
Right.
Well, tell us, if you can, somebody's 70 years old that still can work well, and because they're 70, they go try to get a job at Wallows or one of those stores. I see a lot of older people, and they say, well, yeah, we hire older people, but we don't hire them after 70 years old.
Okay.
And could that be considered a violation of the law?
Yeah, it could be. I guess the hope of the law that says age should not be a factor in who gets the job is that why don't you just judge it on whether the guy's able to do the job? For example, Colonel Sanders was 66, before he hit it big with the KFC. I mean, if someone had a rule that you can't do it at 62, I guess we would never have KFC over the years. But the hope is that age shouldn't be a factor. What should be the factor is, can this person do the job on the merits?
Well, under this federal law prohibiting job discrimination, the federal equal opportunity or employment opportunity laws,
right?
It says it's illegal to discriminate in any aspect of employment, including hiring and firing, obviously, compensation, assignment, or classification of employees.
Sure.
Transfers, promotions, layoffs, or recall.
Right.
Job advertisements, testing, use of company facilities, training and apprenticeship programs, fringe benefits, pay, retirement plans, and disability leave, or other terms and conditions of employment. That's a lot of things where that can happen.
Sounds like almost everything, and they probably had to do that because the employers can be very creative in how they discriminate. In fact, it's insidious. They can adopt a test or a strength test, that only the men can pass and the women can't pass. That's what they're getting at there. A lot of fire departments have that, strength tests, and that's excluded women, forever in fire departments, and until they finally broke that wall down and that barrier down. They excluded certain races like that. The Chinese, couldn't pass strength tests. So they use these things, and it makes it look like, well, that's objective. If you can't do this, they shouldn't be such and such. They shouldn't be a firefighter. But very often, these tests are used as discriminatory tools to keep out unfavored peoples.
Now, another method of violating this law is by harassment, too.
Sure.
Harassment on the basis of your race, your color, your religion, your sex, or whatever.
You would hope there'd come a day when our mothers and our sisters and our wives and our daughters could go to work, without having to be solicited, to put out sex to keep their jobs. You would hope that there would come a day where that would be so, but believe it or not, it happens repeatedly in the workplace, where women are hit upon, they're harassed, like Chinese water torture, I see people every day, and there are things being said, and what'd you think? I had a dream about you last night, and how long is it before you're going to retire, Gene? And things like that can be insidious.
Yeah, now, also, if a person makes a complaint on discrimination, retaliation for just making the complaint, and that you hear that often,
right?
For making the complaint, That's a violation of law.
Oh, it is, and very often that's the best claim that can be brought, because what our law says basically is this: if a person has the courage to stand up and do the right thing or complain about discrimination against him or herself or someone else in the workplace, we do not want that person retaliated against, because we want people to have the courage to stand up, and assert their rights. And if they're going to get retaliated against, we're going to let them sue for that in and of itself, because we're not going to let employers thwart our process or submarine or undermine our law, by retaliating against people who assert their rights under the law. So it's a very powerful claim that can be brought.
How does this all fit into the whistleblowers law? Now, you handle a lot of those cases, and
Well, the rationale is very similar. What we want people in the workplace to come forward, all right, and blow the whistle on things that are terrible, for us as a people or society, like people dumping nuclear waste in an elementary school playground or in our rivers or in our woods, at nighttime because they don't want to pay the cost of handling it properly, or people taking shortcuts in our meat packing plants, all right, and having adulterated foods go out, packaged. We want people who are inside, workers, to have the courage to step forward and say, wait a minute, this is wrong. You shouldn't let this meat, this is tainted meat, don't let it go out. Or, this lettuce is bad, it's got E. coli, people are going to get hurt, people are going to die, you got to stop this. Or, we don't dump that nuclear waste in our rivers or our elementary school grounds, kids are going to get hurt. We want people who see this happening to have the courage to stand up. And not only the courage to stand up, we want them to know that you will be protected if you lose your job. We will give you a cause of action and you can recover money from them, and I mean money for like years in the future of lost wages. So there's some real teeth in these laws, if you get a good attorney to fight hard for you, these laws do have teeth.
Well, I've been handling numerous cases, and it's very successful in judgments you've gotten for various people.
Yes, I was proud to represent you.
Yeah. They kind of all come together here.
They do.
The whistleblower law, which is really developed and enacted and put into effect on the basis of public policy.
Sure it is.
Public policy says to people who are citizens who work here, whether you're a citizen or not, if you work here and you see some wrongdoing that can hurt other people,
right,
hopefully you will come forward and see that the problem is corrected, or you will blow the whistle and say, I told them and they still did it, now I want to do something about it, and while they do that, they get fired or demoted or transferred to teach them a lesson not to do that again. That's illegal.
Right. And the reason this law is so important to everyone watching this program, is because as you're watching this program, you're not in that meatpacking plant. And we're not in that factory, that's loading up a truck, of waste that's going to dump. And we're not in these businesses, and we don't know what's going on, but we don't want it to happen. And we want people out there to have the courage to come